Okay.
Yeah.
You're around the corner and very close to my mom who lives on South Ridge.
Okay. Yeah, that's the next block over. So
Are you from LA originally?
I am. I've lived here my whole life. So
Okay.
yes, sir.
Outstanding. Oh, I see a few other folks that popped in. Looks like Jay, Tracy, Cynthia. How's everybody doing?
Good. How's everyone this evening?
Hello.
Jay, you have some other colleagues coming on from Wayfinder, or did they send you in as the lone gunman?
No, they're going to be on shortly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Ginger.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. No complaints.
Thanks for
I
that.
woke up this morning, so everything else is good.
I hear you. Keep it all in perspective. I got that, or we got that detailed response to our question, so we sure appreciate that.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Ginger's in a good mood because she's gone on vacation.
Oh, that sounds like some inside information there, huh?
Yeah, I leave. I start vacation on Monday. My mom and my sister live in Arizona, so I'm driving to Arizona because my mom turns 81 and my sister turns 60. So.
Oh wow, nice.
Yeah.
It's great. Congratulations to the fam.
Thank you. My dad just turned 92, so I figure between my mom and my dad, you never know, but I have the ability, I have the gene pool to have the longevity, so we'll see what happens.
Very good genes.
Yep.
That's always.
You'll live for a long time.
That's always good.
Yeah.
All right, and I see a few other familiar faces. Audrey, Karen, Tony, Sherry, Veronica. Welcome everybody. Given that it's 6 o'clock, we always like to be punctual and start on time. So I will officially welcome everybody. We're going to try to keep this moving quickly and free flowing, but respect everybody's time. I want to thank everybody for taking the time, especially at 6 p.m. on a weeknight for this conversation. We've got representatives of County of Los Angeles. Supervisor Holly Mitchell has some folks here. I'll let everybody kind of introduce themselves quickly. Ginger Pryor from DCFS, Jay Allen from Wayfinder, myself, John Heath from United Homeowners Association, and a bunch of my neighbors. Let's see, Ginger, do you want to just kind of start real fast on behalf of the county, and we'll get all the county folks to start with quick introductions, and then Jay, and then we'll have all the neighbors say hi and start. Go ahead, Ginger.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And John and the Neighborhood Association, thank you for, I like to say, allowing us to be a part of this conversation, to strategize around, how we all work together for our most vulnerable, and that's our children. And so my name is Ginger Pryor. I am the Chief Deputy for the Department of Children and Family Services. And I know that I have at least two of my team members on the phone, Karen Richardson and Audrey Shelby. So Karen, I'm going to turn it to you. And then Audrey, if y'all could introduce yourselves, that'd be great.
Thanks, Ginger. Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Richardson. As Ginger shared, I'm a Deputy Director at DCFS, and I work directly with our out-of-home care placement providers as well as other things.
Audrey.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Audrey, Special Assistant to Ginger. I support her with the various things under her purview. Nice to be here.
Thanks. Anybody else from DCFS? All right. How about Supervisor Mitchell's office? I see Emily Williams, and I know there are a couple other folks that are on. So Emily, you want to say hi to the folks real fast?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Williams, and I am a Senior Deputy for Budget and Legislative Affairs, formerly overseeing Human Services. And so as such, I've been working closely with DCFS and Wayfinder and other STRTP district on child welfare issues. So it's my pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. And I would like to introduce two of my colleagues who are here also. Marina Escobedo, who is part of the Human Services team, as well as Tyler Webb, who is one of our newer deputies, who will be serving as the Assistant Field Deputy for the View Park Ladera Heights area. And he is one of your neighbors. So please say hi to him if you see him out walking on the sidewalk.
Well, you know what that means, Tyler. That means we're all going to get your cell number before we let you off the call this evening.
Sounds good. I'm around. So
All right. Anyone else from LA County that we missed? All right, Jay, you want to unmute yourself and
Absolutely. First, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. Look forward to talking and listening tonight. My name is Jay Allen. I'm the President Chief Operating Officer at Wayfinder, and I'll let Veronica introduce herself as well.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Veronica Artiaga, Chief Program Officer for Wayfinder.
great, welcome. Any other Wayfinder folks?
I don't think so.
Okay. Tracy, why don't you go ahead and say hi, and we'll just quickly let each of our neighbors, if they want to say, a few words, maybe where they live, what street, etc., and we'll go from there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. We really appreciate everyone taking the time. So I'm Tracy Purefoy. I live on Escalon Avenue, which is just a stone throws to Wayfinder. If I go to my front door, I can see your facility from my house. And I'm part of UHA, and I am also on the Wayfinder committee. I'm the chairperson. So we put a committee together of people who are part of UHA, as well as neighbors, people who live in the area. So everyone who is representing literally lives right near Wayfinder.
Very good. Thank you, fearless leader. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Go right ahead.
This is Jacelyn. I am now part of UHA. I'm actually kind of excited. I live directly behind. I'm on Valley Ridge and 54th. I am the second house from the corner, from the back entrance of Wayfinder. I have lived over here since I was 9 years old. I'm now 43. I'm hoping we get some resolve, and I work with a nonprofit that is contracted with DCFS, so I also am super aware of DCFS.
Very good. Thanks, Jacelyn. Otho, you want to go?
Hello there. Hello, everyone. Otho Day. Hi, Karen, Veronica. I live on Valley Ridge. There's the brick wall that separates your facility from my back parking lot, my backyard from your parking lot.
Thanks. Real fast too, I see Captain Johnson's got his camera prompt up here, and I thought I saw Sergeant Collins. So we do have a couple other folks from a different department in LA County Sheriff. So we appreciate both of you gentlemen being here as well. I don't know if you guys want to say hi real fast, but if not, that's fine. We'll keep it moving. Any other neighbors want to say their name, where they live real fast before we start?
Hey, Johnny, can you hear me? It's Chris Johnson.
Yeah, go ahead, Cap.
Hey, sorry about that.
No problem.
Technically. Just want to say hi to everybody real quick. Glad to be on this call. And we're here to assist however we can.
Great. Outstanding.
Hi, my name is Trish Jones. I'm the Escalon Avenue Block Club captain and a friend of Tracy.
Right. Thank you, Trish. Any other neighbors? Go ahead, Tony, you want to unmute yourself? Tony, you got to unmute yourself. Hang on. Tony, if you're...
See, you unmute him.
Okay, there we go. Go ahead, Tony.
My name is Tony Nicholas. I lived in View Park for over 40 years. Past president of UHA. I was president for over 12 years. And I'm just really happy that the community is coming together again under John's leadership. It's just been really something. I'm just really proud to be back on board with UHA.
That means a lot
Oh,
coming.
and another thing, I just got my vaccine today.
All right.
Yeah,
Very
everybody
good.
get a vaccine.
Yep.
Get your vaccine shots.
Standing ovation for that, Tony. Thank you. That
All
means a
right.
lot. That means a lot coming from you, sir.
Amen.
Any other neighbors want to say hi? I see Richard Rice, my fellow UHA board member, is on. I'm sure there's, let me see if I can flip over to page 2. See if I see anybody, any other familiar names. But in any event, if anybody wants to chime in, we're going to do our best to try to keep order. Just, raise your hand. Obviously, the chat is open. I'm not going to mute everybody. Helen Maxwell, you wanted to weigh in?
Yes. Hi, I'm Helen Maxwell, and I've also lived in View Park for over 40 years.
Outstanding. Well, welcome, neighbor.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
And Sean wanted to say hi. Sean.
Yes. Can you guys hear me? My name is Sean Madison. I'm over on Escalon as well, too. Friend of Tracy and Trish's, and definitely here to support everything that you guys are doing in the community.
Excellent. Glad to have you. And I think I just saw another person that said they wanted to unmute and say something real fast. Let's see. Sure. Was it Cherie?
Oh, I just put it in the chat. I just said hello. I'm on Escalon Avenue.
All right. Well, hey, when you put it in the chat, you're going to get recognized. So
thank you. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks to everybody again. John Heath, president of United Homeowners Association, and we want to dive right into this. One thing that I know you guys that work in this business have an awful lot of acronyms, and I already heard somebody say STRTP. I think I know what that is, but we may at some point ask someone to kind of give us a brief breakdown for the folks that are uninitiated and don't understand that. But I'd like to start, and Ginger, again, thank you for this detailed breakdown of questions. I think or responses to our questions. We circulated that earlier, and if anybody didn't get that, we can put that in the chat. But I'd like to ask Jay and his colleagues from Wayfinder, if you could, to give us a little more detail on the specifics of which facilities you guys are operating out of. Obviously, we know about the large one, but which specific facilities do you have in Windsor Hills View Park, and what kind of clientele and constituents are you serving from those facilities, if you don't mind? And I'm taking over, Tracy. I'm going to step back and let the committee chair run things, and I'm going to support her. But that's question number one. Go ahead, Jay.
Good. Yeah. So we wanted to definitely give some context. But before I get into it, John, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Dr. Arthur Fields, who some of you may know. Dr. Fields is somebody who's been a longtime supporter of ours, has been an advisor to me over the years, been involved, and he's not in good health. And I spoke to his wife today and promised I would send prayers his way. And those of you who know Dr. Fields, I know would want to do the same. He's somebody who's been important. He's a former educator, community leader, was involved in the HOA, and those of you who know him would probably also think the world of him. So I absolutely want to acknowledge Dr. Fields,
and I'll step on you a little bit, Jay, and co-sign that. As most people probably know, Dr. Fields was the founding president of UHA. So both he and Tony, that's kind of the continuum of folks that have helped organize our neighborhood and advocate for the right thing. So we definitely join you in praying and sending our well wishes his way.
Thanks, John. So yeah, I wanted to just briefly, so we want to do a lot of listening today. I think that's important, but I also wanted to give a little context. And I think where we're going to go is to answer your question. Those of you who don't know, we've been at the location since 1964. Our campus used to be a military school for kids, opened in the early 1900s and closed in 1964 when we moved in there. We are, over the years, have changed our name 3 times. We were Foundation for the Junior Blind, and then Junior Blind, and then more recently changed it to Wayfinder Family Services. So, and I'll explain what the evolution, why that was. But I know that there may be a misconception that somehow we're a brand new organization. I can assure you, sometimes you go by someplace that says under new management, we're not under new management. We've only had 3 CEOs since 1953. I've been at the agency for 20 years. But what's happened, and I think, and I shared this with John a couple of years ago, I walked John through some of the evolution that I think it's worth repeating for all of you, is that we first started serving kids, obviously in the 50s, but what happened in the 1960s and 70s is that with medical advances, babies were surviving at lower and lower birth weights. And with that, they were diagnosed with other disabilities. So over the years, we've seen not kids just that were blind, but had medical issues and behavioral issues and also developmental challenges. So we, over the years, have developed significant expertise in serving kids that weren't just blind, but had other challenges. So fast forward to about 20 years ago, so shortly after I started, DCFS had reached out to us, and we began almost 20 years ago to serve foster kids on campus and a residential program. And it sort of changed form because that there are public policy changes. It's licensed differently. I won't bore you with all that, but I just wanted to give some context that we've been doing this for a lot of years, and there's a natural connection. And I won't belabor this, but there's kids with disabilities, like we've served and have served since really 1953, have a higher percentage of having contact with the child welfare system. There are more foster kids that have disabilities. So for us, it's been sort of a natural match, and sort of leveraging our expertise to help kids in the community that happen to not just have disabilities, but have other challenges. But I wanted Veronica to share a little bit about, sort of get into more specifics that I think, John, you're asking for, is exactly what's happening. And before I do that, I want to also assure you that we are still serving more kids that are blind in California than any other agency. We still have our school on campus that's for blind kids that have developmental disabilities. We still have our independent training program for adults that have lost vision. All of that still happens. Granted, during COVID, a lot of that has been remote, but all of those services remain. The name change was really a reflection of trying to incorporate everything that we did, because it's since 1971 we haven't just served kids that were blind. We started to serve adults that were blind, and the name didn't fit for many years. So that's a little bit of the context, and I'll let Veronica share.
Okay. Again, everybody, thank you for having us today. A little bit about myself. I've spent about 15 years in the child welfare space. I'm also an adoptive parent of children who've spent time in foster care. So I am so incredibly passionate about children and families thriving in our communities and safety for children. And that's really what led me to my work at Wayfinder. I don't know if Jay mentioned this, but we are a statewide organization. We have programs for blind youth and adults in Northern and Southern California. We also provide in-home services to children with multiple disabilities, including vision impairment, really all across the state. As Jay mentioned, many of these are children who are age 6 and under, and who are also in foster care. So that, just speaks to the overlap of kids with disabilities and in the child welfare system. So we also have a statewide adoption and foster care program. As for our programs on our main campus and in our neighboring community, as Jay mentioned, we have dedicated housing for adults who are blind. It's an independence program for adults who may have recently lost their vision or are interested in gaining more life or job skills. We also have our school still on campus for children who have an average of about 5 or more disabilities. These are children who need additional resources than what their local public school or homeschool setting can offer. And some of the children that attend our special education school, they also live in our group homes, which are in our neighboring community. Over the last few decades, we've responded to an increased need for residential programs for children and adults with severe disabilities and those with special healthcare needs. In addition to our group homes, we provide mental health services on our campus and also in the community. And as Jay mentioned, we've served foster youth on our campus for about 20 years. Alongside these programs for children and adults, we also have our cottage. We call it the cottage. This is a temporary shelter program for foster youth that we were chosen to open in 2016. Many of the children that come through this program are coming to us after being removed from their home for the first time. We also have, as folks have mentioned earlier, a short-term residential therapeutic program on our campus, which serves foster youth. Many of these youth who are in our STRTP, short-term residential therapeutic program, trying to catch myself to not say those acronyms, are actually children who are from the South Los Angeles community. So we believe it's really important that children and families, they really do better when they receive support in their home community.
And Veronica, let me jump in real fast. I know Tracy probably has the same question. I heard you mention group homes and the cottage and the STRTP.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that the cottage activities and the STRTP stuff happens on the main campus primarily?
Yes.
And exclusively?
Yes.
How many,
yes,
how many, it would really help us if we could get maybe, in the chat or separately a listing of the group homes and just the actual physical locations where you guys are active, just so we have an idea of, where you are and folks can really understand the breadth and depth of your activity in the community.
Okay, I'm not sure that I have those addresses immediately handy, but perhaps
It's okay.
we can follow up and send that information out.
Yeah. We're, we'll develop a list of deliverables. Tracy, were you going to jump into?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for providing us with the overview of the services that you provide for the community. And I know that it is needed. It's so we appreciate that. But for time purposes, we're going to get to the meat of the matter.
Sure.
At this point. So we understand that you pretty much established a presence with Wayfinder in the community around 2018, if we're correct. And our understanding is that you are providing services for troubled youth, mental health services, and things of that nature. But our biggest concern is that there have been quite a bit of police presence at your facility due to ongoing issues. So that's one of the main issues that we want to discuss. What is your security protocol? What type of security are you providing? Because our biggest issue is that you have the youth there. It's an unlocked facility. Therefore, they're able to leave at will. And I'm sure it's against, you're not giving the youth permission to leave, but they're still leaving at will. And so they're essentially wreaking havoc in the community. And so there's a huge outcry in our community. We have a lot of retired people that live here. We have a lot of families, we have young kids, adolescent kids. So, that's a big worry that we have, So can you discuss the security aspect of what type of security you provide?
So we do have security guards that are on our campus 24/7. During the night, we've got 2 guards that are on campus and, that provide support. Their role primarily is to patrol sort of the area around campus, both inside the facility and the perimeter of the facility as well. I want to just kind of also mention that one of the things that we really are hoping for coming out of this meeting is that we're not just having this one meeting, but that we're actually establishing an ongoing relationship with you all where we can connect. And there might be things that come up as suggestions or questions that, we don't have answers to right away, but that we want to form a relationship to where we are a part of your community and we're not, sort of operating as a siloed on an island, within this community that is so clearly connected and supportive of one another. We want to be a part of that. So I just wanted to preface, as we're getting into the meat of it, that that's really our goal here, is to hear, all of the feedback that you all have, and then move forward in a way that we'll try and answer as much as we can today. But if there are questions that are asked, or there are suggestions that are made, we'd like the opportunity to sort of take that back and continue these conversations as we move forward.
So can you elaborate on the job description? What does security do at your facility when it comes to the youth being able to leave the facility? Are they able to stop the, we'll call them residents?
So the security guards, their primary role is not to have that type of interaction with our residents. They can be eyes and ears on our campus, and their role then is really to call and involve our staff, our program staff, to come and support the needs of the residents when those issues arise. So again, the security guards are they're a contracted group of folks that we have on site with us. So we really want the kids, the staff who are interacting with our kids, to be those who are most closely working with our youth day to day. They tend to be more effective in meeting the needs of our youth. So their primary role is to involve the staff that are on campus to then support the needs of the youth.
And I think that's probably, Veronica and Jay, a big sticking point and a concern for us, because from what we understand, Captain Johnson, Sergeant Collins are on, they can certainly speak to this as well, but they got over 800 and something calls for service to your facility within a 1-year time period. And, obviously we all know about the most recent horrific incident that happened last month, but there's been kind of a series of bad things that have been going on, affecting 54th Street Elementary and nearby neighbors and so forth. So, from our perspective, we recognize and appreciate all the great work that you guys do. It's obviously important, but just from the brass tacks of, guaranteeing some sort of security and safe operation for the surrounding residents, for your own staff, who I understand are concerned enough about parking their vehicles that they park off the campus and they can't park on the, on the Wayfinder campus. Tell us a little bit about, what you plan to do to implement some changes so you can get things headed in a different direction, because it just sounds like, from our perspective, things have spun in a real bad direction.
So I'll let Veronica can respond to that. I do want to give some context, because as Captain Johnson and Sergeant Collins would tell you, that we have these collaboration meetings with DCFS and Karen's and Ginger's folks. And one of the things that we note is that those calls primarily are required by our licensing rules. That most, when you look at, because I think what sometimes people hear, 800 calls, they think we're calling 911 800 times, and it's really not the case. There are some incidents that are serious that we're concerned about, you're concerned about. We can talk about those. The lion's share of the calls that we make are a result of the runaways that Tracy was sort of referring to, where we can't, just because of licensing rules, we can't prevent them from leaving the campus. We are then required by licensing to call our friends at the Sheriff's Department and notify them. And what's a particular rub for us and for them is that it's sometimes one kid that might run away would prompt several calls back and forth. Let me give you one example. We had a kid that we were serving was terribly abused at home, but as we've seen in other circumstances, that they still have a deep connection with their mom. So this young youth was running away to get back to his mom. So we knew exactly where he was going, and he was doing it constantly. Now the court order was that they weren't to have any contact. That one kid alone, and us even knowing where he was going, prompted dozens of calls to the Sheriff's Department. So it's something that we've been, putting our heads together with the supervisor's office and DCFS and the sheriff's department about, is there a different sort of approach to some of these calls that would help alleviate for sheriff's department from having to respond to all of these when they're not, they're not life-threatening calls. But it does require, at least the way that their system works now. I don't mean to speak for you, Captain and Sergeant, but their policy requires them to respond to each one of those calls, even if it's, in my humble opinion, it's not necessary.
Okay, Jay, and we appreciate that. We're not talking about those calls. We're talking about the kids that are leaving, going into the neighborhoods, copping weed, marijuana, weapons. They're breaking into, they're vandalizing the schools in the area, our surrounding area. They're breaking into our cars. They're stealing cars, so on and so forth. So we don't want to make light of the situation as though some of the kids are homesick and they're just leaving to go and visit their mom. No, we're going to be honest about this. A lot of them are leaving because they're doing things that they should not be doing. And they're terrorizing our neighborhood. So that's
let's talk.
I
don't want to not talk about that. I wanted to give some context because it sounds like 800 is 800 911 calls, but I don't want to discount that there are some serious issues that we see on our campus, and it spills over into the homes around, particularly when we're serving kids that are so severely abused and neglected that, sadly, they sort of act out in a way that, is concerning to us and it's concerning to all of you. I can let Veronica talk about sort of the program side of it, of what we do under those circumstances. But I would point out that this is a challenge for not just us and not just you in this community, but serving this, even if it's a small percentage of the population, which is what I would suggest to you, it's still an impactful one, right? I mean, we're still seeing the issues that you're seeing that, I think, largely is a systemic issue that is, even well beyond Ginger and DCFS, that this has been a result in large part to a statewide change in public policy around this. That I don't think, we could talk about it. I don't think you guys care so much about that. I think you're probably going to say that's fine, what's going on at the state, but what can we do locally? So I'd like to talk about that.
Okay. Well, can we discuss? Well, obviously what you've been doing isn't really working, to put it lightly. So I think we need to move forward and discuss what you're going to do in the future, not what you've been doing in the past. But what I want to ask is, what is your policy and procedure when it comes to dealing with youth that are constantly breaking the rules? So let's say you have a young resident who is, let's say, perhaps assaulting the staff, assaulting other residents, being verbally aggressive, perhaps physically aggressive. What are the steps that you take? What's the first infraction, maybe the second infraction? Do you have them to sign a contract? What is your protocol when you're dealing with a problematic resident?
It's a great question. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, so when we have youth that are exhibiting behaviors that are not safe, there are several things we do. One is all of our youth are assigned a team of mental health folks that are working with them. So the team includes their therapist, their TBS worker, their child and family specialist, and their facilitator. And so that team of service providers gets together with whoever else is on the client's child and family team, which could include caregivers, DCFS social worker, And anytime any of these unsafe behaviors are exhibited, we hold what we call a child and family team meeting. And we talk to the youth about their behavior. Depending on how severe the behavior is, or how many times the youth has exhibited that behavior, we may choose to issue what we call a pre-separation contract, which is basically letting the youth know that if their behavior doesn't change, or if they continue to be unsafe or present a safety issue to the community, to the staff, or to other youth in the program, that they could be asked to leave. And we continue to work with the youth in resolving those issues, and we provide targeted behavioral support to the youth. Now, if they continue to, again, engage in those really unsafe or assaultive, destructive behaviors, we will issue what we call a 14-day notice, which basically means that we're notifying DCFS, the county, that within 14 days, we'd like for this child to be removed from our program. In very extreme cases, we can ask for an emergency removal, and we have implemented that in the past when it's necessary. Again, that would be for something that is incredibly unsafe and very dangerous behavior. But I know that our kids are engaging in these behaviors that are disruptive to the community, that are, unsafe to our staff at times. And, we're really coming from a place of trying to address the trauma that these kids have experienced, that has, sort of led to the behaviors that we're seeing, which are really symptoms of the abuse and trauma that they've been through. So we're wanting to really put in a lot of effort and focus into addressing and helping them to work through that trauma. Sometimes we have kids that aren't receptive to that, and we have to move through these steps to ask them to not be a part of our program. But that's the protocol that we have in place for addressing those behaviors.
Can you give us an example? Let's say a resident, one of your youth residents, assaults a staff member. Take us through the steps that you take.
Okay, so if a resident assaults a staff member, we would immediately have so in the actual moment, we implement what we call PROACT. It stands for Professional Assault Crisis Training. All of our staff are trained in PROACT to respond to assaultive behavior that they might experience while at work. We also implement a trauma-informed engagement model called collaborative problem solving that our staff are all trained in to engage the youth and help to de-escalate those behaviors. So in the moment while that behavior is happening, we would implement PROACT, which also has communication components to help de-escalate behavior, and collaborative problem solving to try and de-escalate the youth. If the youth is not receptive to that, if they're not responsive to that, and the behavior is very dangerous, we will call law enforcement out. If safe, we will also restrain the residents from engaging in that assaultive behavior. In order to do that, we have to have the right number of staff to the right youth to make sure that we're able to safely do that. And that's part of the PROACT response training that we implement. And then, after, sort of as we're coming to a place of de-escalation and even actually before we, before we're sort of, while we're in the middle of crisis, we actually have a protocol where we involved a therapist. So if it happens during the day and the therapist is on site, they will respond immediately. If it happens after hours, the therapist will respond to the facility to help de-escalate the youth. After we've de-escalated, then we do safety planning with the youth to help them understand how their behavior was unsafe, and also work with them on what we can do to keep them safe so that they don't engage in that behavior again. So we would do immediate safety planning with the youth. And then sort of after we've de-escalated and it's maybe the next day or perhaps the same day, depending on how serious it is, we would gather and we would call the DCFS social worker and our treatment team, and we would hold a child and family team meeting, and we would all get together and talk about that behavior. And Again, depending on the severity of the situation, we may choose to issue a pre-separation contract or a 14-day notice. And if it's incredibly significant, we may choose to ask for an emergency removal.
And so that's what I want to kind of get to. At what point do you decide that you need to remove the resident from your facility? How many times does it take? Let's say you have someone who broke a rule last week. He left for so many hours, and maybe a month prior he assaulted one of the other kids. I mean, at what point do you decide? What is I'm trying to get more information on what is your procedure to at what point do you decide that this youth needs to be removed? This resident, we cannot handle him. He needs to be removed from the facility.
It depends on the severity of the safety issues present. If this is somebody who has assaulted other youth or staff multiple times, we're going to more quickly, we're not going to sort of wait. There isn't a prescribed number of times that we have to move through. You know, this is a first offense, this is a second offense. It's not prescribed that way. And what we're really trying to do is make the best decisions that we can for the youth that are in our program and the youth who is also exhibiting, you know, the other youth in the program and the youth who is exhibiting the unsafe behaviors. We tend to really try to work with kids that are engaging in behaviors like running away over an extended period of time, especially as we're in this pandemic. One of the things that's changed is that the kids aren't in school. They're not, having the same kind of just community passes for them to have permission to leave and come back the way that we did before the pandemic for, health and safety reasons. So so those behaviors we tend to sort of,
close your door.
We tend to sort of work with the youth for a longer time when they're exhibiting some of those behaviors. But when it comes to assaultive behaviors, we tend to take those a lot more seriously and have sort of a shorter time frame where we're expecting the youth to make changes before we might ask them to leave.
Thank you,
Hi.
Jason.
Yes. Hi, Veronica. I'm Jacelyn.
Hi.
I have
Hi,
a few
Jacelyn.
questions towards this, obviously. It seems to me, and I'm not sure if you guys have numbers, if you do have a high turnover of your staff, if so, because they park in front of my home daily, if so, how are these children that are and I'm specifically talking about the STRTP program, how are they connected? Because it's a short-term therapeutic program and I work in therapy for a nonprofit. So how are these children being connected if there's a high turnover and you have to build trust in these therapists? It's a concern to me that maybe they don't have enough of a connection. 1, 2, I want to know about your turnover. And then the other question I had was, why do you guys have some 18-year-olds in your program? Are they AB-12s? And if you want, you can explain what an AB-12 is, or I can, it doesn't matter. And then the other statement I want to make is I live directly behind. Prior to the incident that occurred in January of this young man's death, I have personally had your youth on my stairs smoking marijuana, telling me I had to wait for them to roll their blunt. I went outside with a bat. 2, there was 4 of them. I don't know if they were all from your program. I believe 3 of them were, that were in a stolen car, were parked across the street from my home, smoking marijuana loud. I went outside to ask them to quiet down. It was around 12 o'clock midnight. They then started to do donuts and circles and screeching and driving fast up Angeles Vista and ended up hitting the lady's house on the corner. They weren't able to run. I was able to identify them from sitting on the corner. The week after this young man's death, I witnessed some of the teens leaving your facility with Hennessy bottles, walking down Eileen Avenue towards Slauson. That same weekend, I witnessed some gang members across at the bus stop in their car, yelling across to your youth on your facility. It is unsafe. I'm going directly to it because we have elders. I have elder parents. I have a 4.5-year-old child. I feel, and I don't know if I could speak to a lot of people, that I need to protect myself, and I'm a female. I have lived over here since I was 9 years old. I don't feel safe with my 70-year-old parents taking a walk around the block. And the only issues we had, that I personally had, and I'm sure my neighbors immediately, when it was just the Junior Blind of America, was the staff parking. But now we've escalated to so many issues. And the other thing is, I want those tennis shoes removed off that line between your facility on the back end and this and the school, because that's a sign of drugs being sold in the location. We've never had that before. I know I asked a lot and I stated a lot, but if you need me to repeat a question, let me know.
Thank you, Jacelyn. Ms. Veronica, do you want to?
Yeah, I really apologize that this has been your experience. And I also have 2 4.5-year-olds. So I understand what it feels like as a mother to worry about the safety of your children and want to be in a community where your children are safe and your parents are safe. So I really, I very much connect with you there. I will say that we absolutely do our best to connect with the children in our program. We do have, I don't have the statistics with me right now in terms of the percent of turnover that we have overall. I will say that the staff turnover in our mental health program of the therapists who are working directly with the children on those significant behaviors, it is a little lower than the turnover of our milieu counselors who are the ratioed staff doing monitoring and supervision of the youth day to day. And we do have even these youth that have engaged in these sort of unsafe behaviors, there are people in our program that they are connected to. I think that, there is just so much trauma that they've been through, and they've been through such an incredible amount of adversity in their lives that it's very difficult to overcome, even with those really supportive resources in place. And as far as, the general safety concerns in the community, there have been several situations, a couple of which I've heard you describe that we've been aware of and that we've followed up with the youth immediately in that way that I just described, of having those child and family team meetings involving their social workers, making sure everybody's aware of what is happening. And then,
why aren't you removing the problematic youth that are at the facility? That's the question that we have. We would not have an issue with you if you had a plan in place where you are identifying the problem, trying to work with them, and if you can't work with them, then you remove them. Because
you ask DCFS to step in, please, because this is not an appropriate question for Wayfinder. This is something that is legally governed. These are children who have been abused, neglected, abandoned, and otherwise maltreated. Some of them have families that will not welcome them into their own homes. Most of these youth are Black and brown. I'm going to ask DCFS to please step in. Even though they are not lawyers, they can speak more to the state, CDSS, and the licensing laws that require these children to be in these settings. And I promise you, the state does not want these kids in these settings. They want them in family-like settings. And the fact that they are in institutional facilities is absolutely, it's shame on us as a society that these children are in these facilities and not with families. I would really like DCFS to please address that though, because Tracy bring up an excellent point, but it is not within the purview of any singular STRTP to make that decision.
Yeah, that's, I definitely want to hear it from Ginger and get some discussion on that policy point. Thank you for that, Emily. But I think from our community's perspective, we're simply saying, we recognize that if we could wave a magic wand, we certainly would, change what's happening with Black and brown kids in particular, as far as the foster care system. But hey, at the end of the day, there needs to be some protocol and consequences and measures taken, because we can't be expected to absorb the impact from some state policy change on how they're going to put people in a less restrictive facility, and that ends up spilling over onto Angeles Vista, et cetera. So go ahead, Ginger.
And thank you, John. Thank you, Emily. I have my hand raised in the chat, but this is, I think that what I'm hearing is I know that folks want, resolute answers right now, and I'm just going to set the frame that there is not one. And I think that we're going to come to that by doing what we're doing right now. I could say that, what Veronica stated, yes, they can call, Wayfinders can call us and immediately ask for the removal of that young person. And what's going to happen is that we're going to come and pick up that young person, and we're going to find another STRTP that will take that youth, and that youth will be in another community. And so while I respect and understand what is being said because it's affecting your community, we have STRTPs all over the county. And so we have to manage all of that. We have to manage those behaviors. We have to also, first and foremost, do our job to try to protect those young people. I think, just to kind of give a high level of some of the challenges, that we face is that, this isn't just a DCFS issue. I think that this is a county-wide issue where some of the leaders have to get together so that we can do a better job of having a collective response of how we serve our most vulnerable young people. And so I did share with you all, and I sent it a little bit before the meeting, so I know that most folks may not have had time to read through that. But one of the things that we're experiencing right now, in addition to the pandemic, which also escalates behavior. So if I can speak for myself, I'd like to consider myself a relatively mentally solid individual. But during the pandemic, even I have been stretched to the depths of my limits with regard to isolation and those things. And so we have young people, to Emily's point, that are experiencing extreme abuse and neglect and all of the trauma that's associated with that, coupled with the fact that now we have to take youth that already have traumatic experiences and we have to isolate them because they're not allowed to really be able to interact. They can't go anywhere. I mean, they run away, but there's nowhere really for them to go. There's no restaurants, there's nothing open for them to even, interact in the way that our young people are traditionally accustomed to doing that. So I just wanted to paint that landscape. So that only exacerbates issues. The other piece is that we, meaning the department, and then ultimately our providers, our partners, are having to deal with a much higher behavioral risk population now than we have ever had to deal with, given some changes with regard to probation. Some of their lower level juveniles have now been released, and that means that the department now has to absorb them. And we cannot turn them away when parents make the decision that they're not going to come and pick their children up. So they're either going to end up on the street in some community. It may not be your community, but they're going to end up in the street somewhere. Or we are going to have to figure out, where we can support them and where we can place them. And I know that my response is not the response that folks want to hear, because the bottom line is these young people are affecting your community, but we are trying to figure out solutions for us to be able to address this very, very difficult population. So one of the things that we are doing, we have already pulled together all of the leadership across all county departments. So probation, mental health, substance abuse, and the list goes on. If you all look at the document that I provided to you, it will list all of the department heads that are a part of now this activated task force, and also the direction that we're going, that we sent to the Board of Supervisors to lay out every single action that we plan to do and every single step that we're going to take, which is one, interfacing not only with your community, but also interfacing with all of the other communities where we have STRTPs and where we have our traditional transition shelter care facilities. We are going to be asking the community to help us think through what our response has to be. Some leaders might not say this to you on the phone, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Just because I sit in this position doesn't mean that I have the answers to every question. It doesn't mean that my ideas are going to be the ideas that are going to be right. And so that at the end of the day, I'm actually calling on you all because we need your help to design something that is different, because we do recognize that this isn't the most effective response that we have. Children, quite frankly, shouldn't even be in facilities. You know, as Emily said, we want them to actually be in homes, and we want them to be able to wrap those homes with the type of supports that they need. But that also takes a lot of work because, Tracy, to your point, you know, when you're looking at, you know, a young African-American male that's 16 years old that has behavioral issues a mile long, maybe has some juvenile justice interaction, that profile doesn't look as positive to a foster family that is willing to take that young person in. And so we have to do a significant amount of heavy recruitment to get foster parents that are willing to support us in supporting this young person. And I do believe that this is going to take us some time to try to figure out, you know, what is the best response. Removing wayfinders isn't going to help us serve these young people, because we are going to have to put something like a wayfinder in some other community. And so
we understand that, and that's not what we're asking you to do. What we want you to do is to be able to identify the youth that you're not, that facility isn't appropriate for everyone. You understand? And I'll give you an example. One of the 18-year-olds, and we won't get, I mean, it is what it is. One of the 18-year-olds that were involved with the alleged killing of the social worker last month, he has been a problem for some time now. This, as I understand it, this young gentleman, if I'm correct, his name is Keith. He was kicked out of several facilities before arriving to Wayfinder. Okay, so the problem is when you have someone who has been kicked out of other facilities, that's an identified problem. And he was kicked out of other facilities for extreme behavioral issues. Okay, so then you put him smack dab in the middle of a community. It's going to be a problem. Okay, so that's one of the issues that I have. Why aren't you able to identify the problems? You know, I'm not saying we want all the good kids in our community, but we want you to at least be able to identify the kids that you aren't able to handle. If you can't handle them, then you need to move them to a less populous facility that's not smack dab in the middle of a community of homes.
Right. That's the Ginger. I don't want to over talk, but that's definitely the concern here. You know, as someone said, prior to 2016 or 2018, you know, these were not issues, but as the clientele at the facility changed, and you know, kids are coming and recognizing that there are, you know, no real consequences, oversight, etc. We've seen a gradual ramping up of bad things happening in the immediate vicinity. And I'd like to get, I know Sean, Cherie,
I think Karen wants to say something to address that.
Can I just make sure that, Emily, right quick, that when we're talking, so if we could not identify like youth and youth names, because that is something that we cannot do, the confidentiality piece. And I see that this is live on YouTube, so we really have to restrict that part of the conversation. So I just appreciate if we could just honor that piece. Thank
Right.
you.
And we, just so you all know, we do record and, for the community broadcast all our meetings. So I should have said that from the outset. And that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Emily, I know you wanted to get Karen, but we also have some other neighbors that have had their hands up. So Karen, go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly share that I appreciate the conversation, but I think there's a part of this conversation we're missing a key voice, and that's the voice of the state in regards to what this system was established to address. The options that our department have for youth that you've been describing are short-term residential therapeutic programs. Those are the youth who've had experienced trauma, who are acting out, who need that highest level of care that we have. And all of our short-term residential programs are in communities. I happen to live in a community where I have 3 near me. We have similar issues. I see our next door app, people are talking about youth who are running away. Our local sheriff, we're talking about how they have to address those incidents at those facilities. So I think that the challenge we have is that when the continuum changed, we place all of the youth with the highest level of need in one location. Not the smartest move, maybe not. And so how do we address the fact that we need to address the needs of these youth, give them the safety and the support and the structure and the therapeutic treatment that they need without having it be all in one facility? I think that that conversation really needs to involve our state partners, because this was a system-wide change, as you mentioned, that happened that I think has unintended consequences, where you have a facility that has youth with the highest level of need all in one place.
And Karen, are you saying that Wayfinder is that facility where the highest level needs youth are going?
All of our short-term therapeutic residential programs are to address youth like this. So we, as Emily shared, our first hope is that we can keep children at home safely with supportive resources. If not, find family, friends, important people in their lives. If not, then we find resource families or foster families. But the youth who are having the serious behavior issues, our option as a department are short-term residential therapeutic programs. And that's where the youth go for their treatment. We're hoping it's short-term, 6 months or less, but a lot of times, can you imagine, with the level of trauma our children experience, it sometimes does take longer than 6 months. But the idea is that this is where we have as an option as a department to have children reside where they're having their needs met and having their therapeutic issues addressed. And it was designed this way, the continuing care reform, this is our option. After this, it is a locked facility, but that's, of course, requires a higher level of care for youth to be entered into, because it is a locked facility. But we only have 2 of those in the whole state of California.
And I'm gonna suggest that we get Sean and Cherie and a couple other people that have had their hands raised. But let me just, for clarity, are we saying that the state is responsible for the decision to create an STRTP at Wayfinder? That's part of our issue, is we don't have any understanding, or we're not notified or consulted at all when that decision was made and when the facility transformed.
What happened was there was legislation called AB 403 back in 2017 that passed.
Right. No, I know about the
Exactly.
legislation. I'm saying the specific decision to make Wayfinder an STRTP. Who was responsible for that?
I mean, Jay and Veronica can speak to that, but they were a group home and they had to transition to this type of facility in order to provide this level of care to youth that would be placed with them.
Sean, go ahead.
I alluded to that earlier, John, that over the years, I was saying that we've served foster youth on the campus in the same space for 20 years. But the type of license and the STRTP we're talking about is one of them. We've had several over the years that we've had to respond when there are child welfare or any sort of public policy changes. So this was just sort of the latest change that we responded to.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback on what John was saying, obviously the center's gone from the junior blind to Wayfair. And just speaking for the community and historically in Black communities, we feel bamboozled. Basically it just kind of seems like, something was put over on us, because we were not aware that this facility had gone from the Center for the Junior Blind to a Wayfair Family Services. So, I've been for over 30 years, I've been mentoring Black youth. I'm very aware and knowledgeable in regards to gang culture. I've seen some of the kids at Wayfinder. Some of them are cripping. I've heard some of the terminology. I've seen them in action. So, you know, I'm very aware of that type of culture. My car was vandalized about 3 weeks ago. And since this has changed over to the Wayfair Center, several cars on our block have been broken into repeatedly. And like I said, 3 weeks ago, it almost looked like a bullet had been shot through my back window of my car, you know, and upon further examination, it wasn't. But, you know, so I'm very concerned. You know, I have 3 kids. I've instructed my kids. I live on Escalon. You know, I've instructed them not to drive or ride their bikes or scooters near the Wayfair Center because it's a very dangerous place, you know, and judging by the type of licensing that you guys actually have, you know, I personally don't think it's a good fit for our community. You know, our community is an up and coming community. Just across the street from Wayfair, a couple of months ago, a new home was sold for almost $1.8 million. So I couldn't imagine if I was that person that purchased a home for $1.8 million, and now I'm seeing Escalon and Angeles Vista on the news where a young man is murdered in a facility. And you guys have been well aware of the climate at this institution for a very long time. You guys have received over 800 and something calls. You can say it's for runaways or et cetera, but you guys know what's going on in there. You knew it was dangerous when you started it 2 years ago. And I just don't think that your licensing can fit this situation, nor do I think Wayfair is a good fit for this community. Now, I don't know a great deal about the level of licensing and how it actually works, but maybe you guys need to get a lower level of
There is no lower level. That is the problem.
Okay,
There were 14 levels. There are 2 levels now, STRTP and locked facility. That is it. That's it. I mean, we are failing our children because we don't remove them from the home between 0 and 5 when they're being abused, and they end up in institutions. We're afraid of them instead of realizing they have been hurt over and over and over.
Let him speak. Let him finish speaking.
Can I finish speaking, please?
Go ahead, Sean.
You can, but also it's called Wayfinder, not Wayfarer.
Listen, I've been in mentoring for over 30 years. I totally get it. I'm not willing to sacrifice my kids' safety for other kids in this situation because you guys do not have the proper facility to house kids. I have no problem with helping people. Everyone needs help at some time in their lives, but I'm not going to sacrifice my family, nor am I going to sacrifice the kids in this neighborhood. I put the word out to families, don't let your kids drive around the Angeles Vista area. And many of the dads, they're very concerned. And some of these dads up here, you know, if these kids come in backyards, you know, they've been coming in backyard, it's a problem.
It's a problem. It's going to get, yes.
It's going to be a bigger problem.
You know, so you guys have to know that. And
so then why don't we talk about solutions? Are we ready to talk solutions?
Okay.
Well, yeah, in fact,
if people still want to vent, they should vent. You should go ahead and express your concern, or we can transition to solutions.
Let me take a little moderator privilege here and ask everybody to take a step back, because obviously we're all committed to making positive change in our community. Nobody here does not have the best interests of our kids at heart. But Emily, you have to recognize that we are not folks that just fell off the turnip truck. I mean, this is a serious policy decision that occurred with no notice, no involvement of our community whatsoever. And now, 4 or 5 years after the fact, we're having to come here and deal with this like it's a serious social issue, and we all have to put our sociology hat on and somehow figure this out. But the point is,
before you go on, wait, I want to confirm with Jay.
I'd like to finish my point. I'd like to finish my point. We've had DCFS as the regulatory agency, and I'm sure some other acronyms that I'm not smart enough to know.
They're not a regulatory agency, but go ahead.
Okay, well, somebody is responsible for looking over the shoulder of whoever the agencies are that receive county money, correct? Through the state program
that would
or whatever.
Be the California. That is what Karen is saying. They are not in this meeting.
Okay, well, we'll have a follow-up
Answer your
meeting so we
question.
can make sure we get everybody who's responsible. The bottom line from where we sit is we have a facility here that has basically gotten out of control. What we can argue about, you know, the pluses and minuses of whether it's good or bad policy, but the point of fact is there's some serious issues here that we have to deal with. So the question that we have is there a regulatory or protocol system or something in place now, or does one have to be implemented so that our sheriffs can do the job they're supposed to do and we as a community can get back to some kind of life without having tennis shoes thrown over our line and kids walking up and down the street doing what they do?
So can we talk about this as the reality that it is and not the subjective interpretation of what is happening?
What's the reality? What's different from the reality that I just stated?
What do you mean subjective?
If we look at the big picture of what is happening with youth in our communities, we used to have thousands of kids in our probation camps and halls. We are now down to 400 children there, which people are applauding and saying that's wonderful. We have sent children home. Children are living with family, with non-related extended family members, and we don't have kids in the camps and halls anymore. Let me ask you this. What do you think the mental health and emotional health is of the 400 kids who are in our probation camps and halls?
We're not talking about those kids. We're talking specifically about Wayfinder.
Exactly.
You're talking about what's going on in our community. You don't live in our, Emily?
No, I live down the street from homeless shelter.
Community. You're not being victimized by these, by the youth. Sorry, don't get us wrong.
No, I'm trying to get you to a solution. Are we here to vent or are we here to discuss solutions?
No, we're here to let DCFS know and Wayfinder, Jay, know that what they're doing is not working. You have the youth there that's running the facility. You have a large turnover.
That is the subjective interpretation of what is happening.
That are coming and going because they can't deal with it. They don't have the proper structure in place that's able to handle the residents at the facility.
And you know what?
And you know that as a fact, or is that a subjective opinion?
Yeah, you know what? Let me hold on one second, Tracy. Since we're getting into subjectivity versus objectivity, I think I've got the perfect solution. Either Sergeant Collins or Captain Johnson, if either one of them are on, maybe one of you guys can speak to your perspective from law enforcement about consequences and your guys' experience when they're called out for service to these calls. Because we don't know, none of us are going on those calls, and you all are the kind of the folks that get that last call before things really go bad. So why don't one of you weigh in on this, since we're being questioned about our passion and subjectivity about something which clearly will make you emotional if your community is being subject to something and it seems like people are unwilling or unable to do something.
Hey, John, this is Captain Johnson. As far as being on the calls, I'll let Sergeant Collins respond to that. He actually is on several of those calls, and he sees firsthand the consequences. So, Sergeant Collins.
Sarge, you may have to unmute yourself.
All right, so.
Oh, there he is.
There
Wait a minute, I just.
Almost.
Yeah, he unmuted and then I accidentally muted him back. Try one more time, Sarge.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sarge.
There you are.
Wait, hold on. Let me get this.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, because I have bad volume where I am. But in terms of the, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of the calls, right? So the last couple of years, the calls have gone up, right? So it's been a variety of calls. Like Mr. Allen had said earlier, some, we went from like 650 to over 800 in the course of a year. So the gamut, the bulk of them are for the report calls where the youth, the residents there have left the facility without permission. And then, like Mr. Allen said, we have to follow up and enter them as runaways. So that's part of it. And then on the other part is that we do get a number of assault and vandalism calls there. And in terms of the actions, sometimes with the new rules, with what probation has done, sometimes when certain violations of the law have occurred, sometimes our hands are tied. We can't, traditionally where we would, and our eyes have taken them to probation for their alleged crimes. The probation is no longer accepting them. So we get a lot of times where we're responding, and sometimes the facility calls, we get there, and then once we sort things out, we've had it both ways where we've had to take the youth and cite them out to DCFS or have them sent to probation. And then there have been times we've gone there and then the staff doesn't want anything done. And so we're there to respond to the community, whatever the needs are. We don't make judgments, but we know that generally when we're called out for the severity of the crime, lights and sirens, and you have the whole station responding to a facility, it's one of those things where, sometimes our hands are tied and it's frustration all around. And so sometimes we're called just so we can just level the situation, and then everything's okay. Then they don't want anything done. But we can't force anybody's hand. So hopefully that answers, if there are any questions you can ask me or the captain, but there has been an uptick. Is it because of COVID? I mean, I don't know. I don't make those judgments. All I know is that there are numbers. We know that the assaults have gone up, vandalism calls have gone up, and the instances of unauthorized leave/runaways have gone up over the past year. Did that answer your question?
Sergeant Collins, real fast, and others may have questions, but in your mind, from your experience, is there a clear set of protocols that are followed at Wayfinder when you get a call, as far as at what point you guys either are called or get to take custody of somebody? I mean, how does that all work?
Well, like I said, I mean, part of it, sometimes we get cooperation from the facility. Sometimes we don't. They're reluctant to identify youths that have been involved, possibly in an assault or possibly vandalized facility for which for whatever reason they called out. Sometimes we get cooperation, sometimes we don't. So in terms of answering your question, there isn't any consistency. I think that we're called out to handle the situation, to bring some level of calm, and then that's it. But then as far as action being taken, most times the facility, the employees there don't want us to take any action.
I think what Sergeant Collins may be referring to is we've had our hands tied a little bit with situations where, let's say a youth has marijuana, and of course we confiscate that from them, and they get highly agitated and potentially assaulted. And it may escalate, and we have to call the sheriffs. And the sheriff's deputies, I mean, I would say DCFS sheriff's deputies, humbly us, I mean, given the circumstances, everybody's really doing the best they can. So what the sheriff's deputies will come out and say is just give them the drugs back, because it will sort of de-escalate the situation. And Sergeant and I have talked about this, that the challenge for us is that we really can't do that. So, where it may be perceived by the sheriff's deputies that we're not being cooperative, and there may be some of that. I mean, I think that we've had some things that our staff have done that we've not been pleased about, and I suspect that Sergeant and Captain have had some things that deputies have done that they're not, completely pleased about either. These are not robots; these are people, and people make mistakes. But most of the time, at least the stories that have been shared with me by the sergeant and others, is that it's the rub between what is allowed through licensing standards and what they may be recommending in the moment. I'll add to this, and I want to be careful to not sort of overpromise and underdeliver, but it is clear to me that yes, we have the STRTP and there are systemic issues there. There's also been a major impact as a result of COVID that Veronica alluded to it earlier, where the kids would have some more freedom that they don't have now, where they're not engaged in school. They don't have the consistency of it, in the routine of it. Sergeant just mentioned something that we see, it's tied their hands and tied ours, where to Tracy's point is when it gets to the point where a youth should go. We've had situations, and I've talked to the sergeant about this, where there's no place to take them, right? Because probation has been on lockdown. Now we're starting to see, knock on wood, that the systems that prior to COVID that would have been in place to support us a little bit are, starting to function a little bit more normally. So we're more optimistic going forward that, to Tracy's point, is when you get there, that there's some sort of action with, admittedly, the small percentage of youth that aren't benefiting. Most of them do benefit from it, but I think what Tracy and all of you are focusing in on, the ones that don't, that they're not responding to the program. And Veronica and her staff have gone through the interventions, the contracts, and it's not working. That's I think has been sort of our concern. I know, talking to Ginger and Karen, that their concern as a systemic issue, that I think a lot of people's hands are tied. In the meantime, if I could throw out a potential solution that has sort of worked in some cases. John has reached out to me on some cases where there had been some tagging that was done that we're able to quickly take care of. And when we've been notified by neighbors that, hey, we have a kid, out doing X, we'd really be grateful to be aware of that in the moment, because what happens is the kids that are leaving, you may have seen this, that our staff will follow them and they'll run, and maybe we can't keep up, but maybe they're on back to the facility. You're not. Let me just finish the thought, John.
Okay.
Let me finish the thought. So if you are able to sort of identify, let us know that in the moment, that would be helpful to us. It would help us help you and help the youth.
That's what I was going to ask you, is who should we call, or how should we make that notification?
Yeah, and I think that what we've done, and Ortho, I think, and others have had the phone number that we've said, hey, call us in the moment. When it is absolutely, the time it's happening, call us and let us know. So we have an on-call number. Veronica, help me. I think we'll get it to you, John, if you don't have it.
Is that the 310-893-9814 for Ani?
Yes.
Sargsyan?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's not Ani, that there's always somebody that is on call 24/7, 365 days a year.
At that same number?
That is the number.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jay, we don't blame you. I don't want you to have the idea that we're blaming you. If I understand you correctly, your hands are tied. But the problem is that, to no fault of your own, your facility and facilities such as Wayfinder they're just ill-equipped to handle problematic youth. Okay, when we're talking about mental health issues and things of that nature, I get it. I understand. I'm a nurse. I've been a registered nurse for 20 plus years, but we're talking about the more extreme behavioral issues. When they get out of control, they're coming back, they escape, they come back high, they're assaulting the staff. That's a problem. We don't need to be there. We don't want them in our community. That's the bottom line. The state has failed us, period. Emily, the state has failed us. And as a community, we're going to do whatever we need to do to eliminate the problem, because we're not going to live like hostages in our own community. We're not going to do it, period.
So Tracy, if I may, just really quickly, so that folks are aware, we're moving forward with Wayfinders to transition out of the STRTP. So that's number one. And so we will be moving to what is temporary shelter care, which is a 10-day maximum stay for young people that don't have some of the same levels of behaviors as the youth that we put in the STRTP. So that's number one. I didn't say that up front because I think that the issue is much larger than just STRTPs and whatnot. It's about the gravity of the situation that we're dealing across the country with escalated behaviors in child welfare with youth. And so I reserve that last part for that final part. So that transition is happening right now. And Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's only 6 youth left in the STRTP, and we are working to transition those youth to other facilities. So that's number one.
And Ginger, I'm sorry, that's a DCFS determination that's driving that?
It's actually, it's Jay, it's Wayfinders and DCFS. We are working in partnership
It is a group of stakeholders.
Resolution. And, so that's also a part of, what we heard from y'all, what we're trying to do in the task force, our conversations with the supervisor in her office. So know that we have been working behind the scenes to address this issue just across the board. This is more forefront and present because of issues that have happened and because you all have been very vocal in a positive way, which is because, John and I, just so everybody knows, we were having our sidebar chat because I know that this is an emotional discussion, as it should be, because I believe that the passion comes from a place of wanting good things to happen to our children. And I'll just be quite frankly, these are African-American youth, these are our kids. We can strip away the DCFS conversation, the Wayfinder, these are our kids. And so we have to figure out a way to think through together, even when this transitions to the TSCF and that issue is resolved. I want to continue to stay in conversation with this group because at the end of the day, our legacy is on a pipeline to prison, period. This is what's happening. They may not be our kids by birth, but at the end of the day, they represent the future when we're no longer here. And so we have to make a decision as a collective community what we're going to do, even as we move forward to resolve the concerns and issues that are happening at Wayfinder. And I am asking you all to please stay at the table with us. I can't change what happened in 2016. And that's what I said to John. I wasn't here for that. I don't know what happened then, but I'm here now. And I'm going to remain at the table as I promised you the last time that I was on the call. I'm going to remain at the table and I'm going to remain communicating with the community because the only way forward is through partnership with the community, period, in order for us to transform the way in which we do this work. And that's going to be a long-term solution. So I am asking you all to row with me and to row with the department to not just change what's happening in your community, but to change the way in which we do this work across Los Angeles County. And my third and final comment is that I want to dispel the myth that only STRTPs are in African-American communities. That is not true. I live in Pasadena, and there is a facility right down the street from me in Old Town. And so that is the area that I live. And so I do think that there are opportunities for us to do, and I mean the royal we, to do a better job of communicating, as we should, with communities before we put facilities, into communities to get feedback from the community and those things should happen. There is a bifurcation between the county and the state. So we roll up and report to the state. The state licenses facilities. We don't contract with facilities until they are licensed by the state. That's not to defer and say this is all the state's fault. I'm just trying to give you all some order around things happen. So as Karen said, I do believe that one of our calls or the next call, the state needs to be here because the state does need to hear from you. I wish that the state would have had conversations with the community. It is apparent that they did not. But what I can do now, sitting in this seat, along with Bobby, is to make sure that as we move forward, that we talk to the leadership at the state, that these conversations do need to happen before we move forward. So I just want to set that frame and just put my intention out there as leadership in the department about what we are going to do and to be transparent with you all. And as we shift, I've already signed off on the contract actually to transition to the TSCF. So that is done. So I just want you all to know some of the next steps.
Ginger, can you go into that a little more with the STFS?
The transitional shelter care facility. So when a young person, comes into care, and as we work to look for placements for those youth, sometimes we have to place youth in what we call a temporary shelter care facility, so that we can have an opportunity to find the best appropriate, hopefully resource family home placement. These youth that go into the TSCFs, temporary shelter care facilities, do not have some of the high level behaviors that are in STRTPs, because the STRTPs, as Emily said, are our highest level of treatment facilities before they go into what we call our most restrictive, which is lockdown. And there's certain criteria that youth have to meet in order to go in lockdown. We're talking about self-harming behavior where they're harm to self, harm to others, along with a whole host of other issues and concerns before those most restrictive facilities will take those youth. And as Emily said, we only have 2 in a county of 10 million people, 2 million children, and quite frankly, 38,000 youth that we have some level of interface with, whether they're in our system or are we working with them from a voluntary, just from a numbers perspective, so you all will know that. If we have youth at the highest level that are locked down and we don't have space, we have to send them out of state. That is not something that we desire to do, because the bottom line is you're institutionalizing kids and they will become institutionalized adults. And so, I'm not going to act like we don't have work to do in the way that the system is set up. And I won't bore you all with some of the things that we're trying to do right now, but we are doing something with the feds right now, with feds and the foundation community and other funders to try to transform the way in which we serve, period, which will require engagement of the community, because we are actually trying to prevent children from coming into the system at all. And that's a much deeper in response that we're trying to do. And so what I would like to do is to continue these conversations. I would like to make sure that you all are at the table as we, what I say, design the new way forward for the system, because we recognize that what we're doing now, it isn't working. It isn't working for children and it isn't working for families. And that's just facts. And we have to have a better way to serve, and we need your help to do that.
Thank you. Sherry, Otho, and then Jason want to say something.
You know what, I think that people have already answered the question, and I think we're looking at now, and I want to hold space for you, Tracy and Jocelyn, and just the folks who have been affected the most by what has happened. And we can see that emotions are high because this is our neighborhood, and everyone I know wants the best for the children and the young adults that live there. And I hear that hands are tied. I think we are all just looking for just what is the answer. That's not my area of expertise. And so I don't know that I can give input into that, but I do want to know what is the answer for how do we move forward. And I appreciate, Ms. Ginger, I really appreciate your honesty and the detail in which you explained things today too.
Okay. Me, Otho?
Go ahead, Otho.
Okay, well, listen to this conversation in doing over half of my years on this earth. with DCFS. I'm a little torn on both sides because I live the community and, being involved with DCFS for so many years. I see some things where the state really looks like the ones who really need to be addressed, because the STRTP, the people who wrote this policy, wrote this program up, probably could not spend a shift with the kids that they're working with, that you all have to work with. That said, you have to have the proper training of working with the young people. Sometimes college degrees not always to get it. You got to get to the meet and greet of people, or meet with these young people on their level. And I know you say we can't talk to them, can't do them, no, but you got to communicate with them. If someone is talking to you a certain way and you talking to them another way, that's not even that's not communication. So I think the department needs to loosen up on some things of how to relate to these young people to get to them. And I've always joked with my probation counterpart back in the days, and still do, the only difference between a DCFS kid and a probation kid, a DCFS kid run faster. These are the same kids. So we have to realize that. And now looking at the PRO Act, you're gonna need PRO Act when you get there with the TSCs when they come in, because we don't know what the level, they may not be level 14, but they're gonna be level 14 material. So they're gonna be there. And that 10 days, we know DCFS, we say 10 days on something, that may extend to 15, may extend to 20. So they're gonna be there for a while. So let's be realistic on that too. Then we have, but the PRO Act is a two-edged sword, because the PRO Act is really taking down a child. And I think Ms. Maxwell is on the phone now, who helped facilitate the whole development of McLaren Hall, is on the line, on the call. And knowing that when you take down a child, there's something breaks, the state, the county, and everybody, and their parents will come at the woodworks. We're talking about lawsuits if something break. So it's a lot of things involved just to go over tonight. We can't address all these things. But I just want to say that I'm glad to see that it's going to, that population will leave. And I do have an extra question, Jay, Veronica. And I want to say Veronica has always been responsible when I called late at night, no matter what time it was, when it was going off, or anything. She was always receptive to my calls. And it did quiet down, but start back up, but that's okay. She did.
And a friendly voice in the middle of the night, although it's it's been a friendly voice in the middle of the night sometimes, but glad we've been able to connect face to face.
Yes, I know how, from back in the days in St. Anne's, we was always on the phone. But I do think that we need to really work together. And when the new population come in, let's say we can put something, now, Emily, we go towards some solutions. Maybe we can come in and see what they need. Maybe there may be some big sister thing, big brother thing, or something that we could come in. Sean got the mentoring program. Maybe we could kind of work with the department on putting something together. But I know that college degrees, working with these kids, not going to always get what we want from the kids, because you got to meet a kid that we always say, if a child is 4 years old, you want to drop down to where they are, meet them where they are. But if you're talking to a kid about certain behaviors and they don't care about no damn behavior, you have to talk to them the way they're talking to you to communicate with them. In DCFS, you got to lighten up on that. You got to. That was my way of communicating. You may not have known it, but that was my niche of communicating with them. I talked with them on their level. They cussed, hell, I cussed, because that was the way we had to communicate. You already know that I'm out now, but that's what we did. That's how I did it. So we got to communicate. So you got to come down. And you can say the same thing to a child and on their level. You can say something like, their behavior is inappropriate. I'm not going to tolerate that. But if that child don't understand that language, you may have to say, boy, you do that shit again, put my foot on your head. I just said the same thing a different way. We communicating. So you got to communicate with these kids. And I think the training is got to be very powerful to work with this population. You got to have the right people, and college degrees are not always the one. That's what I want to say.
Everybody,
but what are going to be at the TSCs? Ginger, what's the level going to be at the TS? The age is going to be there.
Karen, is it 16?
It's between.
Oh, sorry, Jay. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just jump in that there's a couple of different spaces. In total, it would be birth to 20. In in some places it would be boys and girls, and others, we've sort of separated it. But in terms of the two spaces that we're talking about, it would be a wide age range. But because of the space and the locations, we're able to manage it.
And one more thing before I go, did any kid leave? Okay, but one more question.
What did you say?
Did any kid leave your program Saturday night or Sunday morning? Did any kid leave, any male leave between 5 and 7 o'clock, or was gone any time between that time? Because I got some on video who broke into my car, went into my car. It looked like a young male. He could be walking through the neighborhood. But I got a video, but I deal with him on a person. I see him again.
Call him offline about that, and you guys can discuss that. Okay, next Jason, and then Lori G.
Yes, thank you. Jason Lombard, resident on Santa Rosalia, a little bit on the other side, but also done community outreach for about 20 plus years, and wanted to kind of chime in here. I've heard I've sat back and listened and heard the passion that's really being communicated here. And, having been somebody that's been on both sides of this, what I would say is, Emily, to your point about what are the action items and how are we moving forward? And then some other things that people have said about, how do we, what are the solutions? And I think the big thing here is, Tracy, you've created a committee. You've started a dialogue here. You've got Ginger that said that she's here for the long haul. You've got Jay and you've got Veronica that are here to communicate. And it's really, we've got to start with things that we have issues with. We've got to start creating dialogue in the way that we used to talk to our neighbors, the way that we used to talk as a community, in community centers, in different places where we're having conversations instead of being on next door and, doing these long things that don't have dialogue back and forth. So I think, what people should feel encouraged about in this is that we really have had a dialogue where some of the issues that need to be addressed have been expressed. We can give them the space to be able to go back, look at those things. It sounds like there's already some changes that are going to be made. But then to be able to come back and be able to express to us as a community that they are a part of, that they're willing to look at some of the things and look at some of the issues that we have, and then be able to walk with us together and get to a point where that community, Tracy, is one where that committee that you create is one that is an active committee that people can look and say, look at Wayfinder in a positive way and be able to help some of the youth and get to the mentor programs that Otho talks about, and really get this ball moving forward. So just wanted to make sure that, that we are injecting some of the positivity that we do see with having a Zoom that has the people that are this passionate on it all at the same time.
Thank you, Jason. We appreciate that. And Lori, I think you wanted to say something.
Lori, you got to unmute yourself. And we're about to wrap this up, folks, because we're an hour, 40 minutes in. Go ahead, Lori.
I'll go very quickly. In the past, I'm aware of facilities, not this type of facility, but facilities that have had an impact in a neighborhood that resulted in vandalism and various other issues that we are experiencing in terms of auto burglaries, home burglaries, vandalism. Anyway, it's called Union Station and it's in Pasadena. And initially when that facility was put into the community didn't want it because of all the sort of negative impact. But over time, Union Station developed such a rapport and relationship with the community that the community became mentors. And the community became the biggest supporter of Union Station in Pasadena. However, they had phone numbers and everyone in the community had access to that number. Union Station committed, if you call us and you see someone from our facility, we will be there in 10 minutes and we'll commit. And I know, Jay, you're probably thinking, well, I don't have enough money to send people out into the community for 10 minutes. But maybe these are the types of things we need to talk about. How can your facility respond? How can DCFS and mental health respond so that when issues come up? I'm aware of another facility that was somewhat similar, definitely not this facility exactly, but they actually notified the community when people left unauthorized so that the community knew, hey, if you want to keep your kids inside, or if you want to put your car in the garage, or you want to do whatever you need to do, we're trying to find this person who could impact the neighborhood, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we're letting you know. I think what you're sensing and feeling is the lack of involvement of the community at all in this facility that, yes, the state makes the rules, but the county definitely approves the contracts. And we can see by Emily here, the county wants to work with us. I mean, she's reaching out her hand from the supervisor's office to say, hey, give me some solutions. Let's work this out. So anyway, those are two solutions that I'm aware of that have worked in the past. Have no idea if they work in this situation, but it worked in the past. Okay, that's it.
That's excellent. Thanks, Lori. Tracy, were you going to say something? You got to unmute yourself.
Go ahead and wrap things up, John.
Just want to say thanks to everybody for taking.
Hey, John, I'm gonna have to. I want to interrupt you. Can I just? I know you want to wrap, but I want to thank you all for the conversation. I think it's a good starting point. I know we've been talking to Ginger and Karen and Emily and others going back to last year about the transition that Ginger referred to. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, because as I think Otho was saying, that we're still going to see some challenging youth. So that we need to engage. And I love the idea that Tracy's got this committee that we can talk and engage in some sort of constructive way. And I know COVID has made it impossible, but we need to get back to what we were doing pre-COVID, right? When you guys were meeting on the campus and we had community meetings, elected officials were there, used to do a farmer's market. There was much more sort of interaction and less mystery about what the heck is going on campus. So I'd love to find a way to get you guys on the mailing list, because we've been sort of sharing a lot of this, but clearly it hasn't got to you, and I'll take responsibility for that. We've got to do a better job of communicating what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we can be, as good of a neighbor as we really want to be. Because we employ 200 people on that campus from the local community. We've got over 1,000 local donors, 200 volunteers. We're going to, welcome Otho and others to be mentors and, to support our efforts, sort of like what Julie was mentioning. So we're looking. I want to thank you, and we're looking forward to that conversation and engagement. So I know you want to wrap, but I don't want to end without thanking you and sharing that.
Thanks, Jay. We appreciate that. And thanks to everybody else who took the time to be on the call. Just real fast, by way of wrapping up, since we want to stay focused on, solutions and action items, Ginger and I were corresponding in the chat, and we talked about getting some specific contacts at the state level that we can loop into this for some additional accountability. So we'll follow up on that. We definitely like to know more about the timetable for the transition away from STRTP, and, again, just more detail about what is going on at Wayfinder at, the main campus and elsewhere. So hopefully Jay or Veronica, one of you guys can get back to us on that. I know you guys will take care of the thing Jason mentioned with the sneakers that are thrown over a communications line somewhere. That's pretty easy. And I'm not sure if I'm overlooking any other action items that we discussed this evening, but I agree with what was said by several people. I think communication is critical, because if we'd had this conversation some years ago, I think this would have gone a bit differently. So, the more interaction and discussion and dialogue we have with each other, the more informed we will be, and the more we will be able to inform the solution. So with that, unless anybody else has anything,
John, I would just ask, I put it in the chat, but for folks that didn't see it, please, please, please read the task force document so that you all will see what our intention is and ultimately be able to feed into some of the listening sessions that DCFS is planning to do. Karen Richardson, who is on the call, will be leading those. And this is just the beginning of our work. And this is also something that was the department's intention even before the Wayfinder piece about how we were going to be intentional around engaging the community and not just, I want to make sure that I'm clear about when I say community involvement. I don't just mean y'all come into a meeting and then we gonna talk and then that's gonna be it. Because you can be at the table or you can be at the table and then also be a part of the discussion, helping to design the solutions and the way forward. And that's ultimately what I am committing to do and want to do. You know, the things that Lori said, this is how you involve the community, you know, where the community has a voice and the community actually sees us putting into action what we have designed together. And so that's the intention. So read the document. Karen will get the information out around the state numbers, and we can even work to convene the conversation with the state as well. So please take us up on that to do that. And again, I commit to continuing this dialogue. John, if you want, on the offside, we can talk about, you know, standing opportunities to meet with the community and do those things, but we can talk about it offline.
absolutely. And again, we appreciate that and count us in on any opportunities to engage in those discussions and policy making opportunities with the folks that are trying to figure this out, because we do, if one thing I can say for sure on behalf of our community is we are not just going to sit idly by and allow things to happen without being proactive. So hopefully that comes through and hopefully we can follow up on that. If not anything else, again, thanks everybody. Have a good night and we will keep everyone looped in and posted.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good job, Tracy.
Thank you.